All right. This morning we speak to Helen Zille, a profile of a former journalist and anti-apartheid activist. She is a South African politician and humanitarian activist. She's one of the journalists who exposed the cover-up around the death of South African Black consciousness leader Steve Biko. Helen Zille is the Federal Council chairperson of the Democratic Alliance, the political party which is member of the Government of National Unity, or GNU, in South Africa. We welcome her now on Channel Africa's Rise and Shine. Good morning to you, and thank you so much for joining us this Thursday, Helen. How are you?
Good morning, Asanda. It's very good to be with you. I'm very well, and I hope you are too.
We are just a bit cold in Johannesburg. We've got a cold front, but we'll survive. If you even see what I'm wearing today,
sure you will.
It
yes,
shows.
I can see you look gorgeous.
Thank you. Well, today we are, or you are rather, on the other side of the interview. I get to be the interviewer, and you are the interviewee, because we've worn the same hats for at some point. Because you started your podcast called Tea with Helen in 2019. Let's start there. You as a show host, what inspired that idea, first of all?
Well, I'd never seen a podcast in my life at that point, and somebody that I know said you'd be a great podcast host. So then I went on that, and I tried to do that, so it was nice.
What was most important to you in terms of the guests that you wanted to have on the podcast?
Well, I was still a very tough journalist, and I was still in a mood of exposing people, which was probably a bit rough. But look, I didn't have a full idea. I just wanted to take the toughest people that I could and give them a run for their money.
Right. And as a communicator, I mean, you are a journalist, or you were a journalist in your earlier years. Did this reignite your passion for people's stories?
Well, I've always had a passion for people's stories, and whether I was a journalist or whether I was a politician, it didn't change. I'm totally passionate about getting South Africa to work. And why do I want South Africa to work? Because I want everyone to have a future here. I want your children and my grandchildren, and one day your grandchildren to have a wonderful shared future here where everybody has a chance to make it in life.
What were your lessons this time around in terms of hearing from people's stories?
Well, look, it was for a very, very short time, that Tea with Helen podcast. So, I mean, there were far more lessons from my many years at the Rand Daily Mail as a journalist. And there I covered the very worst things of apartheid. As you rightly said, I was the one who exposed that Steve Biko died of brain damage and not a hunger strike, as Jimmy Kruger tried to pretend. And I covered ghastly things like the Cilier Commission of Inquiry into the Soweto uprisings. I covered forced removals. I covered uprisings on university campuses. I went everywhere in my little beetle, and I covered a lot of things and saw much more then than I did in the very brief time of my podcast.
Yeah, and being a journalist at that time, let's go back there. As you were an anti-apartheid activist as well as journalist, you exposed the cover-up around the death of Black consciousness leader Steve Biko while working for the Rand Daily Mail. This was back in the late 1970s. As a journalist at that time, things were very much different from what it is now. There was no social media, not as much as one needs to be considered relevant, like how many followers you have or how much of a media personality you are. A story was a story, and journalists just had to focus on that, and most importantly, remain objective in delivering knowledge to the people. What about journalism at that time do you wish we still had now?
Well, there was absolutely no social media, and no journalists tried to build a brand for themselves. The most important lesson we learned in our journalism course that the Rand Daily Mail ran before you could become a journalist was to know that your opinions were irrelevant to the story. The whole idea was, and this is what we were taught again and again, if you go to a place where a tragedy is happening or has happened, or if you go to a meeting where people are discussing things, there are thousands and thousands of people who are interested in knowing what's going on, but can't get there themselves. So you are the medium that has to reflect as accurately as possible to the greater public what's going on. And your opinion is irrelevant. What people want is the facts so that they can make up their own mind. And that is what we were taught again and again. Today, journalists really don't write for the public anymore, as far as I can see. They write for each other. They're trying to impress each other. They're not saying, how do I serve the public? How do I make sure that the public is getting all the facts they need? How do I be sure that I'm not serving my own ego, but that I'm out there doing the public's work, as it were? And now this whole nonsense about building journalists' brands and getting personal followers and stuff really puts the journalist in far too much of the limelight. They are just the conduit. And that is what we learned so hard in journalism school, and that was applied. Later on, if you'd been a very good journalist doing that for many years, you might get a column in which you were allowed to express your opinion, but not otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah, I wish those times would come back as well. I really do. I think of social media. I mean, right now we're live streaming. I feel like I'm on radio and television at the same time, something that wouldn't even happen even when I started back in 2009. But it's interesting times, and I guess we have to adjust to that.
Yes.
Let's talk about what was happening.
Live streaming. Oh, am I actually on television now?
You are on YouTube right now and Instagram.
drinking my coffee, blowing my nose. Right.
And sometimes you even forget. You just go into your natural state. But
I just sometimes thought the sound is better on the Zoom link, so that's why I was here. But here I am, YouTubing as well. Hi,
yes.
everyone.
Yes, absolutely. Let's go back then to that moment. That's not so... I guess it's difficult to think about and remember, but what was happening at the time and your feelings and maybe even internal emotional conflicts as you are now exposing the real reason behind the death of Steve Biko. And yeah, talk to us there, your mindset.
Well, at the time I'd been covering a lot of very difficult things. I just finished a year of covering the Zille Commission of Inquiry into the Soweto uprisings that, as you know, obviously spread around the whole country. And I heard some very harrowing and terrible things there. And then Steve Biko, who was the Black consciousness leader at the time and who was leading the whole host of Black consciousness movements that had arisen at the time, was a very prominent leader, and he was taken into detention, and within a week he died. That was in September 1977. And after he died, Jimmy Kruger, who was the then Minister of Justice, so-called, got up and announced that he died after going on a hunger strike. And he made out as if Steve Biko had died of hunger. Now, I knew immediately that that couldn't be so. My editor knew immediately that couldn't be so. Steve Biko was a big man. In fact, if truth be told, he was slightly overweight. So there's no way that a big man with lots of reserves to draw on is going to die after a week of being on a hunger strike. It doesn't work like that. People can eat very little for a very long time and nothing even for a very long time without dying. So we knew this was a cover-up. So my editor went and asked me to try and uncover what happened. And my first assignment was to speak to all of the doctors that had seen Steve Biko since he was detained. There was one doctor called Dr. Ivor Lang. He was a district surgeon in Port Elizabeth at the time. Then there was the senior doctor, the senior district surgeon in Port Elizabeth called Benjamin Tucker. Then there was a neurologist called Dr. Colin Hirsch. And then there was the family pathologist, Dr. Gluckman, Dr. Jonathan Gluckman in Johannesburg. And I went to speak to all of them. Dr. Gluckman, with the permission of Mrs. Biko, allowed us to see the pathology report. And there it was quite clear that Steve Biko had died of brain damage and not from a hunger strike at all. And the autopsy, in which they draw fluid from the spine, showed red blood cells in the spinal fluid. And apparently, according to what the doctor told me, you only get red blood cells and blood in the spinal column fluid if you've had a brain injury. And that's how we were able to draw that conclusion.
Your emotional conflicts, did you have any internally in terms of what do I do now with this?
Well, what do I do now with this? We found a way to publish it. The whole point was to uncover a cover-up. We were trying to expose a cover-up that we knew was going on. And obviously, it's incredibly shocking when you find out all of the unbelievable human rights abuses that are going on around you. It's totally shocking. It's distressing. But the only small comfort you can get in the process is knowing that you're exposing it. As I did with forced removals, uprisings, revolts, everything, everywhere. And that's what my job was. But I just told the facts. The facts were harsh enough. The facts spoke for themselves. You didn't have to put any drama on them. The facts spoke for themselves.
Right. 18 minutes past 8 Central African time. It is here on Africa Rise and Shine. If you've just joined us, we are in conversation with South African politician and humanitarian activist, was one of the journalists who exposed the cover-up around the death of South African Black consciousness leader Steve Biko, Helen Zille, who is the Federal Council chairperson of the Democratic Alliance currently. Let's stay with South Africa's emancipation for freedom. You, together with your husband, Professor Marie, had offered your home as a safe house for political activists during the 1986 state of emergency in South Africa. Paint for us a picture of how difficult it was. And I don't know if it was maybe difficult for you, but I imagine how difficult it would be to maintain a marriage or a family life during those times. You also had a 2-year-old son at the time. One can just imagine that life was not just about keeping your home or making sure dinner is served at a certain time, etc. People were being tortured, killed, and arrested. You speak of these human rights atrocities that were happening. There was turmoil.
Well, at the time, I was a member of the Black Sash. And I went to a Black Sash meeting, and somebody arrived there, Jenny Schreiner, arrived there and got up and said they were looking for safe houses, because the police were just detaining everybody. So I went home and I said to my husband, can we please offer our house as a safe house? And he immediately said, yes, absolutely we can. And we were very well placed for accessibility, and we had a kind of a little cottage outside in the garden, which was ideal. And throughout that period, throughout both states of emergency, we had people hiding in our house. Yeah.
Was it difficult to maintain a family and be a mom?
Well, I was working very hard at the time, and, you just do things. You just get on with it. You just do what has to be done. I don't know how to put it this way. You make sure your child is fed, taken to creche, looked after, gets enough sleep, all that stuff. You just do it.
Yeah. And how much do you appreciate the ease now of motherhood? At 74 years old, you've got 2 adult sons. I've got 2 teenagers that I'm struggling with. Does it get easier?
It gets much easier. I mean, for me, the most difficult part was the first 18 months. My eldest son especially didn't like to sleep at all. And it was a nightmare with him. He just didn't want to sleep at all. And eventually, we found a way of getting him down. My second son was a lot easier. I've also got 2 sons. And, you make it work. My sons are wonderful people today. And my husband was a wonderful husband. I've been very blessed in that respect. He always took his parenting duties very seriously. We always shared parenting duties. We both took it very seriously. And we're a happy, loving family today. My eldest son has 2 beautiful children, my grandchildren. He's also got a wonderful wife. He chose very well. So we're in a good space, family-wise.
That's beautiful. You've played so many roles within the Western Cape government of South Africa that I think a lot of people don't know that you were actually born in Johannesburg, in Hillbrow, as an eldest child to parents who left Germany to avoid Nazi persecution. So you've got some Jewish lineage. How much of an influence did that experience have on your decision to fight for the cause of the oppressed?
A lot. I mean, my parents knew what oppression was. It wasn't just a theory for them. Most of my father's family was killed, actually, in the Holocaust. Most of them. I mean, he had very, very few family left. He spent the rest of his life trying to trace what had happened to his family, and most of them had died in the concentration camps. So, I knew from very first-hand experience. My mother's family were also refugees in the main. And that my parents hated discrimination of any kind. My mother joined the Black Sash very early on. My father was in the Torch Commando back in the day. And that's how I grew up, fighting for justice.
Yeah. As chairperson of the Federal Council of the Democratic Alliance, that's been since 2019, and as also you're a former DA leader from 2007 to 2015, and the DA, for those who don't know, if you didn't hear me even earlier, it's South Africa's main opposition party and now part of the GNU. When you look at the state of political opposition on the continent, if we look at cases like Tanzania, for example, Tundu Lissu, the opposition leader, being charged with treason. Uganda's own Bobby Wine, we spoke to here at Channel Africa the other day. Chad's Sukse Masra, who's on allegations of inciting hatred in the country because of his opposition to the leadership. Do you think we could have a full democracy where all voices of oppositions are allowed to be heard?
Well, I think we really must. I mean, that is the system that works best. You should be allowed to oppose the ruling party. You should be allowed to say some very tough things. Obviously, I don't agree with kill the Boer, kill the farmer. I believe that's incitement to violence very badly, and that should be forbidden. But to criticize the ruling party and to mobilize against the ruling party is absolutely a normal part of democracy, and we really stand for that very strongly. I believe in free speech, but that stops at incitement to violence and imminent harm. But otherwise, I completely believe in free speech, and I don't like trumped up charges against opposition leaders. At least in South Africa, we have an opposition party that has grown, and the ANC accepts so far when they don't win an election. In this last national election, the ANC got 39-point-something% of the vote. They fell under 40% of the vote, and they accepted that they fell under 40% of the vote. And they had to put together a coalition government. That's what happens in democracies. And until the whole of Africa can do that, we're not going to have a democracy in Africa.
Do you think we have a strong and credible opposition parties on the continent, looking at the younger ages of some of our African opposition leaders as well? Are we moving to a positive direction when it comes to, relatability and in turn influence of opposition leaders?
I think Zambia is very, Zambia is quite advanced. In Zambia, you have changes of government through the ballot box, and that's what I'm interested in. Do you get changes of government through the ballot box? And that is what's very, very important. It was very distressing to me when Mugabe lost the election in Zimbabwe, and then somehow they managed to put together some kind of wobbly coalition that destroyed the Movement for Democratic Change, the MDC. That was very unfortunate. If you lose an election, you get out of power. Simple as that. Same thing in Kenya. If you lose an election, you don't start putting up coalitions. If the other party got more than 50%, you get out of power and you make place for the other party. It is simple. It's not hard. And until Africa can do that, we won't have democracies in Africa.
Let's go back to that meeting between U.S. Donald Trump as you speak of Kill the Boer, Kill the Farmer song that came up in the discussions between him and our President Cyril Ramaphosa. There was also talks about a genocide against white Afrikaners in South Africa. What were your initial thoughts when you heard firstly the news reports, and what view do you hold now in terms of what you would have said as a response to U.S. Donald Trump?
Well, what I would have said to Donald Trump is that we have far too many murders in South Africa. It's quite shocking how the murder rate in South Africa. I would, if I was the Minister of Agriculture like John Steenhuisen, I would have stood up for the farmers, and I would have said farmers, white and black, are the target of farm murders, are the target of stock theft, are the target of all sorts of crimes. And I would have stood up very strongly for all the farmers and the farm workers. Now, to have a song like Kill the Boer, Kill the Farmer is just not acceptable. And I do think that Trump asked a very good question. How can you sing a song like that and incite a stadium full of people to go out and kill other citizens of South Africa and those that are producing your food and not be arrested? It's a good question, and I'd like to hear the answer to that question. The problem is that in South Africa, incitement to violence, especially if it's against whites, gets accepted quite calmly. I hope no white person would ever dare to say, kill black people, or sing kill black people off a stage somewhere. So that kind of thing is completely unacceptable, and we must never, ever regard it as normal. But I would have said there isn't a white genocide in South Africa. But I would say the farmers are being targeted. Farmers are being targeted by certain political parties. And it's crazy to do that because we have the highest food security in South Africa of any African country. Why do you want to target the people who are responsible for your food security?
Right. Well, on a lighter note, this month of May 2025, you were part of a comedy roast where comedians poke fun at you, your career, and then each other. Why would you agree to do something like this, I wonder?
It's fun, it's a new thing. It's a different thing. I like a bit of fun now and again. I like a bit of sparring. I don't mind an argument, I like that sort of thing.
Have you always been able to laugh at yourself?
Well, I hope so. You've got to be able to laugh at yourself, otherwise you lead a very miserable life.
Right. And of course, at some point now, you have to respond and throw jabs, your own jabs, at whoever made fun of you or on stage. How prepared were you for that?
That's the part I like the best.
Really?
I like throwing jabs. No, I went up there and I was quite prepared for it, yes.
Right. I love it. And that's the note we're going to end it on. But thank you so much. And it's always so wonderful to have a profile or have somebody join us as a guest on the show who has so many facets to them and wears so many hats. And of course, we look up to you not just as South Africa, but as the continent in terms of what you've achieved in your life, especially as a woman talking to another woman.
Great. That's been wonderful to speak to Nombuyiselo, hey? Thank you very much.
Asanda.
Are you Asanda? But why does it say on the bottom of your screen Nombuyiselo?
I'm not sure why it says that. I'm not sure.
That's what it says, Nombuyiselo, because I said at the beginning, hello, Asanda.
Yes.
And then I thought, see, that's a mistake, because on the bottom of the screen it says Nombuyiselo.
Well, it's okay. But thank you so much for your time.
It's a pleasure. Okay, then.
I appreciate it. Helen Zille is a South African politician and humanitarian activist, currently Federal Council chairperson of the Democratic Alliance. That's the political party which is member of the Government of National Unity, the official opposition party in the country, South Africa. Well, we'll leave that chat there because we need to go to headlines now. It's 8:30 Central African time. Good morning, Onele.